Hello and welcome. My name is Rich Frazee, and I will be the host and moderator for this ADEIL conference session. Thank you so much for joining us for Evaluating COVID-Required Online Programming through Visual Scaling. Please welcome Dr. Mark Deshane and Dr. Ray Francis.
Thank you, Rich. Hello, welcome everybody. If you're here with us and you are excited about the topic, we're excited to have you. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate to ask. And for those of you who are going to be joining us by recording, please feel free to email us later if you have any issues or questions. So Ray and I are incredibly happy to be here with you. We have taken this idea of trying to figure out how to evaluate the messy data that has been occurring and transpiring as a result of COVID and try to make some sense of it. And hopefully we'll give you an opportunity to learn a few things along the way. Anything you want to say, Ray?
No, other than I just completely agree with you right now. We are glad to be here.
Exactly. Basically, what we want to talk about is all of this messy data that we've kind of just stumbled upon, right? We've had to be very reactive in a lot of our different initiatives and works as a result of COVID. Many ways in which we've never really planned for, but we've just kind of stumbled upon. And now that we have actually gone through and done a lot of the logistical pieces, what we want to do is talk about ways that we can sit down right now and maybe make sense of some of these initiatives that we've been required to do, and to talk about a process or two, as well as a methodology to talk about how you can make sense of your COVID messes. So how do you make sense of all this hodgepodge of information? Well, a big part of what we're going to talk about is we're going to encourage you to be with your staff and your faculty, to be very self-reflective. We want you to sit down and think of processes and ways that you can, as a group, come to terms with your own realities. We're firm believers, especially in colleges and universities, that we do not get our voices in the room often enough. And what we really want you to do is to work with your colleagues in a way so that you can identify the issues that you are challenged with and the ways in which that you have taken and moved those challenges forward. So we're going to talk to you a little bit about our process improvement guidelines that Ray and I have developed. We've taken Showalter and Deming's Plan, Do, Check, Act, and we've expanded it out. We're also going to talk to you about the need for, like I said, being proactive and sitting together with each other, but we really want you to think about how you deal with issues of rubrics and assessment and evaluation, both formative and summative, in ways that make sense to yourself, your programs, and your students. Ray and I have been working together for the past, almost 8 years. And we came together when I was up at Central Michigan with Ray. He was my mentor when I first came into the professoriate. And we found that we had some very unique perspectives that really meshed together. So we're really happy to be here with you. And we hope to provide you some support in your programs. All right. Ultimately, this is about your students and you and your programs. We believe firmly that we have got to figure out a way, like I said, to get our voices in the room a little bit more. And I'm hoping that at the end of this, you feel a little bit more liberated to actually provide your voice into your narrative, so that when you're doing assessment and evaluations and accreditation pieces and you're looking at your programming needs, that you're able to step forward and say, you know, we feel firmly entrenched in this, and this is the reason why. And we hope to give you some opportunity to have the documentation necessary to make it happen. Ray, you want to go?
I can. So what we would encourage you to start with in looking at this whole idea of data and how we go about it and what we're going to go through with it, we're going to ask you to first of all think about, well, what are your tough questions? I mean, we are all working with assessment, evaluation, programming issues, all kinds of things that impact all areas of our programs. And we're all facing tough questions as it relates to looking at COVID-19 and this idea of mostly online programming, unprepared online programming, and all the things that might go with that. So take a moment, if you would, and think about what are your tough questions you think that you are addressing related to COVID-19 and your program at this particular time. Now, in saying that, I know we're not going to give you very much time to do that, but in saying that, if you're available and with us, do you have any questions that you think you need to answer? See, if not, we've taken the liberty of preparing a few. For example, very oftentimes in looking at what we're doing, when we look at data, when we look at this whole process, we're looking at the idea, is it compliance or improvement? Are you trying to meet or get better? And what does the data tell you? Taking a look at that, are we looking at how are we addressing standards in their format, regardless of where we're at in the country or content, etc.? Are we looking at leadership and structures to improve? And does the data help to do that? Are we looking at sense making and how we move through things and what we do? Are we looking at, as it's referred to, voice, agency, and action? And Mark will refer more to this in a bit, but are we looking at those kinds of things to give voice to our students and the data we collect, agency to things that are being done, and actions to be those actionable items that we have some control over in what we're doing? Also, whose story is being told? As we look at data, data is referred to in many different ways, but one of the unique things about data is that when we're using it, it's telling a story. And it's important as we look at the data to figure out and see how and who is telling the story and the narrative they're trying to make use of. So as we look at data, then it's also that how much is too much, how little is too little. In most organizations, we are just gathering oodles and gobs of data. We are gathering data in lots of different ways. But is it meaningful? Are we gathering too much data, but too little useful information? Mark?
Yeah, one of the things that we've got here is two book chapters that Ray and I have co-authored, and both are related to this whole idea of utilizing process improvement guidelines to deal with data issues. And you might want to pick them both up. We do not get any money for this, but we think that they've done a really good job at taking the basics that we've got presented here for you and moves them forward in an expanded way. The thing that we want you now that we've given you some time to think to do is to put your ideas down on paper. One of the things that Ray and I first realized that we had a lot in common related to is this idea of putting our ideas down graphically, and we're really into graphic organizers. And what we want to do right now is to ask you to take your tough COVID online programming questions and to put them down, to list them down right in the middle. What are some of your tough problems that you've been addressing? What are your concerns? What are some of your needs? And if you would put down 2, 3, 4 of them, and we can talk a little bit about them.
We'll give you just a minute or so to do it because we've already asked you this question.
Anybody feel a need to interject or want to interject?
Yes, academic affairs, yes. Please, what are the tough, we're asking, what are those tough questions about data that you are responding to from the perspective of the impact of COVID-19 on collecting, making use of effective or impactful data?
I like Rich's idea. How do we help faculty work on different types of assessments in online spaces? So is it actually doing it, making sense of it, having discussions about it? What are you talking about here exactly, Rich?
Yeah, and apologies if this isn't exactly tied in with the scope of your presentation, but things along the lines of how can we track that learning objectives are being met. One of the big topics of faculty that I've been supporting is, they feel that they need that high stakes final exam, and we
Gotcha.
need to get all the proctoring software in place, and et cetera, et cetera. And I like to reframe the question as, how can we find different types of assessments that work in this space that meet with their learning objectives?
Exactly. Excellent. All
And
right.
also, yeah,
Go
just
ahead.
related to that, also just kind of tracking faculty readiness and how in that space too.
So one of the things that we've got happening in online spaces is we've got people definitely out of their comfort zone for the most part, right? And because of that, I think a lot of individuals think that they don't feel that they are capable or competent or that they're doing it correctly. And the thing that we find bigly, enormously part of individuals, especially university professionals, is they want to feel comfortable and confident in their skill sets, and you get them out of their comfort zone and it really knocks them out of kilter. One of the challenges that we've got to recognize is that the only way we're going to get people feeling comfortable with themselves and their own skill sets in an era of or a time of angst and uncertainty is to give them opportunities to really feel comfortable with what they're doing and to talk about it. So one of the challenges that we want to have in this graphic is for you to have people feel comfortable about being open and honest and more than anything vulnerable to even discuss what some of these tough questions and problems are. They need to feel that they're able to get it out and to have some open and honest collegial discussions, because some of these might actually require critical conversations, right? You might have to sit down and talk about some really challenging issues in ways that people may not feel comfortable with. So this idea of being sensitive around our tough questions and problems and giving people a supportive ear, I think, is incredibly helpful. So I think, Rich, some of the things that you're talking about would fit into that area. The other thing that we also have to recognize is once you open up the Pandora's box of tough questions, you're going to end up with something like this. And this is Ray's desk, so I'm going to let him talk about it.
Some of us have a lot of data around. That desk, although not mine, represents a lot of different things. If you are somebody, for example, if you have a garage and you have your stuff strewn about, but yet you can walk in and put your hand down and pick up the piece of the tool or whatever it is you're looking for. then it's a meaningful piece of data to you, but it's maybe not meaningful to other people. So how do you take this particular environment, so to speak, with lots and lots and lots and lots of data, and then how do you move it into a very clear, well organized, and effective process? That's where we've talked about the process improvement guidelines that we're coming up to eventually here. And the idea that, well, we have to make decisions based on not every piece of data, but the most relevant and the most impactful pieces of data. Mark?
Yeah, if you notice on that wonderful desk, it's organized confusion, right? It's intellectual anarchy in a lot of ways, but there's also a lot of potential there. It looks like somebody started out with good intentions. They have some storage bins there. They have some drawers, different sizes. You have the nice little cork board. You have the potential there to be very organized and to have everything put away and not having it be cluttered. Well, it really doesn't matter how you started out. If you've got a mess on your hands right now, one of the things that you really need to do is to figure out a way to pull people together and to support each other so that you can make some sense and order out of your confusion. And what we want you now to do is then to go back to our graphic organizer here, and we want you to look at the messy data, your tough problems, and what is the data around those things? What's the messy piece around those things? And we'd like you to put those into B and D, and I'll let Ray move this one forward.
So, yeah, as you look at the center where your tough questions are, then to the right, you've got the idea that there are some things that you are collecting that are really, really good, some that maybe aren't fitting. So, with the center column are your questions, the column to the right, D, becomes okay, what data are we collecting that fits very well? The column to the left, B, what's the data we're collecting that maybe doesn't answer the question we wanted to at this particular time? You see, I think far too often, one of the answers that we get for this particular part of the activity is grades. Well, grades, well, they're wonderful. Well, grades are low-hanging fruit. Grades are easy to get. Grades are inflated. Grades are a lot of different things. But if you're not answering your question through the use of grades, they're not that effective. They contribute actually to a very messy kind of a profile, because one of the things that happens is you say, well, all of our students are doing so well, everybody's getting an A. That doesn't necessarily reflect on answering a particular question about your overall program, about assessment, about accreditation, or anything else that's going on. So grades can potentially create a unique situation for data, as can things like student opinion surveys in or end of course surveys that faculty may use or programs may use. In nature, they answer a lot of questions. In reality, far too often, we have the messiness of many students not filling them out, which detracts from the available data we have to use, or in some situations where they are required, then we have students who maybe aren't taking them as seriously as they need to. So again, many different forms of messy data that you're working with, some good, some problematic, and that's what those two columns are for.
Right.
So, Mark?
The nice thing about the reactive nature of COVID is it's going to cause people to have to sit down and have, like I said, critical and crucial conversations with each other. because how one person views maybe, let's say, a -1 column, that, this data is here, and it's really not indicative of us doing very well. And somebody puts it on the +1 side, I think we've done really well. That gives people an opportunity to talk and to come together and to have some discussions. And that brings us into our process improvement guidelines. Remember, I said that Showalter and Deming's Plan, Do, Check, Act continuous improvement cycle. Everybody knows about it. Everybody's used it. Well, Ray and I were bold enough to think that Showalter and Deming needed some revision. All right. So what we did was we say, if you're starting with the planning stage, you're probably starting 2 steps way too early. And what we wanted to do is to take and expand it out, because we believe that organizations that work on initiatives and do really well don't just jump right into planning. They have to prepare first. They have to figure out what is going on within their organization. They need to have some groundwork. They need to have some baseline data, right? You need to really make sure that your organization is capable of moving things forward. After you've prepared enough, then you really have to prioritize. You have to sit down and you say, out of these 5 things that we've identified that happened in our COVID programming, uh, on our online, these are the 2 things that we need to really address first. And we're placing these at the top because they impact, maybe our scheduling, maybe they impact our faculty, maybe training. There are reasons why you prioritize certain things. And by taking the time to actually be very cogent and cognizant of the fact that you have got to put things in a, for lack of a better word, almost a rank order to support the types of interventions that you're going to be giving at your organizational level or at the individual level, that gives you an opportunity to dispense out in a very measured way the resources as well as the supports necessary to make that happen. Once you get that prioritization done, you then go in and you start doing the plan. How are we going to make this happen? How is this going to look? Who's going to be involved? All of that needs to be articulated. You then implement it. You put it into place. And this is a time when a lot of people feel that, oh my gosh, we're finally getting started. We can move things forward. We can, just sit back and let it happen. I'm going to tell you something. It's been our experience that when people start implementing, that is not the time to let up on the gas. Because a lot of times you're going up a hill with implementation, and if you let off the gas, you're going to end up going backwards. You need to maintain momentum and forward progress in order for you to keep moving forward. And then at the end, you evaluate it. Were you successful? Were you not? What made things go better? What things were not so good? And then you start the whole process over again. But the thing that we really think is very important, not just through the PIG, the process improvement guidelines on the outside, it's the pieces in between that you might see that I have conveniently skipped over. And I'm going to let Ray talk about that. This is where we have individuals needing to sit down and have open and honest collegial discussions. We call it the IER.
And the IER is a model where we take a look at structurally imposing a reflective process. Far too often, regardless of how we're working with data or how we're working with anything, we skip over the idea of reflection. Now, reflection for us is not, I'm going to say it again, is not a passive process. Rather, it's an active and engaged one where there are actions to be taken as we move forward. As you're moving from the prepare to the prioritize, you'll go through the identify, explore, and resolve stages of reflection, meaning you're going to identify a topic. To be ready to move forward with that, you need to use and say its name. You need to define it. You need to understand how it all fits together in many places. Then you need to explore it. What is the current best practice research? What is the current thoughts about directions to take? What are the available kinds of things to about this unique topic that you need to know and share? And then the resolution stage, the resolve. It's a commitment to an action. And far too often when we look at things, we do not look at resolving them for the future. We look at things that occur, data, events, as singularities where we say that was a one-off and we move on, rather than saying, given these specific kinds of situations and circumstances, here's what this is, here's what I know about it, and here's what I know about how we should be moving forward. If we do that at each stage of the process, between prepare and prioritize, between prioritize and plan and implement and evaluate as we move forward, if we take the time to clearly identify all of the aspects of what we're working with, to clearly explore the options and things, and then clearly to make an actionable statement, to resolve it, to move forward. This whole process moves forward at a greatly enhanced effectiveness. Mark?
One of the things that we like about the IER step between the stages is it gives people an opportunity to step back, no pun intended, and to retreat in a positive way. If you do not go through this reflective practice, this IER stage, you might rush headlong into an initiative out of enthusiasm or out of necessity without understanding that you're probably rushing into something that's not going to be successful. For a lot of people, we recognize this during COVID, right? We realized that we had to jump to online programming in a lot of our programs, and we did anything but prepare and prioritize. We went right into planning because we had to get up and running rather quickly. But think about what would have happened during COVID had we known that we were going to have to put a lot of our major programs dramatically in different ways online. Think about how we could have prepared for that. What would some of the identification processes have gone through with your teams? How would you have explored this need to prepare? And then how would you made a decision to move things forward? Who would have been part of that decision? Would it have been your faculty member? How about your support people? How about your deans or your chancellors, your provosts? More importantly, how would you have prepared your students? How'd you have gotten them ready? How would you have stayed in alignment with maybe some of the regulatory agencies? In our program, we still had to go through and do internships for our pre-service school administrators. Yet it's significantly different. How are we making sure that they are continuing to have the same types of experiences? And how are we getting the assessment results from them in ways to say that, yes, we feel comfortable that they have met the criterion? So one of the nice things about COVID is it led us to recognize and realize, one, that we are capable of doing more than we probably ever thought. But it also, I think, in a lot of ways, made people actually realize and recognize that we need to be a lot more collegial proactively than we had ever anticipated. One of the challenges I think we're going to have in the future is we're going to have so many different options and opportunities that people are going to expect out of us that we're going to have to jump into a lot of these discussions reactively. So one of the things we want to encourage people now is, as you are in the midst of all of this, we're hoping that you are taking anecdotal records. We're hoping that you are collecting anecdotal artifacts so that once things settle down, knock on wood, you're going to be able to actually go through and do some of these IER processes that we're encouraging. How are we doing?
I'm doing good. You?
I'm great.
Mallory's doing fine.
I'm great.
There she is. All right. We have some information on the IER process if you're interested in reading some more about it.
Again, we get no money for that. That is just a publication we've got that's available.
Yes, we just get lots of affection. It's interesting because we've had people contact us across the nation. We had somebody who actually wanted to utilize a lot of this work in our process, working on COVID stuff through FEMA, which was really kind of impressive. So we were excited about that. Anyway, so let's go back to this whole idea of our messy data, because we've got, what, how many more minutes?
10.
10?
Yeah, in about 2 to 3 minutes to present, and then we allow about 10 minutes for questions.
Okay, unless you, Rich, are incredibly interested, maybe we could go a couple minutes longer because there are a few things that I wanted to make sure we touch on, okay?
Yeah.
So let's look at what makes our data messy. Well, a lot of times people think anything that's not quantitative is messy. Well, we're strongly encouraging people to recognize and realize that the power behind a lot of what we do in social sciences, especially in education, the field of education, is qualitative oriented. And we have got to really figure out a way to make some sense out of that. We've got to turn that information or that data into information and make it into an artifact that's actually actionable. We also have to recognize that we have tons of demographic labels and trends, and we kind of just brush by them. But more so than ever, we're thinking that demographic trends are an incredibly powerful support because we're seeing shifts of and movements of individuals in ways that we hadn't before COVID. We also have to recognize that a lot of things that we're looking at are indicators. Some might be forward indicators, some might be lagging indicators. You've got to really sit down and have discussions with your colleagues as to which they are, or maybe they're a little of both. It all depends on what the variable is that you're looking at. But if you're looking at a lagging indicator as a forward indicator, you're going to have some challenges. All right. We also have to look at this idea of standardized versus localized. Everybody says all politics is local. Well, I'm beginning to believe that a lot of our information and our data is much more localized than we think, even if it can be norm referenced or standardized across the nation. We also have to look at locus of control. How much control do the people that are part of this whole data amalgamation configuration and figuring it out, how much control do they have internally? Do they have any kind of ability to support what they see as needing to be happening? We also have to talk about this idea of low-hanging fruit. Oh, we need three ideas, 3 elements. We need to, provide 3 artifacts. Well, are those the best artifacts? Are those rigorous enough to give you the type of information that you're looking for when you look at the data? Or are they just convenient? We have to stop focusing on the convenient and realize that we need to start answering tough questions. And if that's the case, we're going to have to sit down with our colleagues through the IER process and to identify those things. We also have to recognize that our data is not binary. It's not on or off, yes or no, left or right, up or down. A lot of it is complementary. All right. And I don't think we're going to get an opportunity to go through the rest of this. So I guess what I'd like to end with is what processes do you have that you've been wrestling with? What are you looking at to utilize to deal with your tough questions and your messy data? And how can we answer and support your initiatives so that you can be more successful?
I'm going to paraphrase for Marjorie, because I think she's in there indicating, she says, bravo for those who speak up for actionable qualitative data. Stop focusing on the convenient. That's us. Um, Tough to do when designing research that has no funding. Agreed. We'll also share that we work with a process called visual scaling. That's a translational process that takes um, qualitative data to make it into an actionable quantitative process. Mark's put the piece up there. We've done several articles on it and we work with it. We, although not entirely able to get through that topic today because of where we're at, we're listed in the program. You can send us an email. We will be glad to share any information or resources that we have. But visual scaling is a process that is a zero-based, ratio-embedded process. And just to give you the 1-minute overview of it, if you've ever had an injury, and gone to a physical therapist, and they've said, "Oh, look, here, pick your arm up," and you go, and it goes this far. Okay, that becomes your zero. That becomes the baseline that you have. And if you keep working and it goes a little bit higher, that gives you the improvement. And eventually it continues to improve. And you can do one of two things. In the process we advocate and work with, you can either reset your zero over time, which is really effective, or you can simply look at this idea of growth in a given ratio based on professional knowledge bases of those involved. The scale that Mark has listed there is, you'll notice a couple of things about it. One, it is not linear. We, for some reason, over time have looked at 70, 80, 90, 100 as being the way to do things. Why? It has nothing to do with anything other than a level of convenience. If we were going to say, well, how many people should get an A? And we could differentiate that. That's where this particular scale fits and how it works. Okay. Again, we don't have enough time to go through it, but we are more than happy to share and send information. I see Mark's got his information, and I will turn it over to Mark to close us out.
Yeah, sorry, we were a little too long-winded, and
One of us was.
it's usually me. And I did not realize that we had a whole lot of other people down below Deb, so I'm sorry.
Yeah, we
Um,
do.
yeah, that's wonderful. All right, so anyways, I have given you both Ray and my emails. We would be more than happy to talk to you about this because there's so much wrapped up here. But we think that the power in all of this, especially making sense of messy data, is getting opportunities for people to sit down and talk. And you need a lot of times just a process to make it happen. We believe that the one that we have provided is a great support. And once you get that to a point where you feel that you can start dealing methodologically with some numbers, uh, visual scaling is a nice way to quantitatively take both qualitative and quantitative assessment data and turn it into something that is scalable and actionable.